Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment launched just over a month ago, on the 6th of November 2025. And in many ways, the feelings I had while playing were bittersweet. While it serves as a fantastic counterpart to Tears of the Kingdom, showing us the true story of the imprisoning war, the game also marks what is most likely the end of the Wild era of Zelda games. The final entry in this grand saga that began with Breath of the Wild in 2017. Well, in truth, this era began even before then. In 2014, over 11 years ago, when series director Eiji Aonuma appeared on Nintendo's E3 stream to unveil what he called
the new world of Zelda
and the new incarnation of Link. This was something of a watershed moment for Zelda, only a few years on from the extremely linear and, at the time, extremely divisive Skyward Sword. This was a promise of something different. An unshackling from the established conventions of the Zelda series, a new foundation. Little did we know at the time that the new world of Zelda would be such a literal statement. This has been the world of Zelda for more than a decade, and as of right now, it still is. Not only did Breath of the Wild get an almost unprecedented direct sequel in 2023's Tears of the Kingdom, but two spin-off games too, in 2020's Age of Calamity and 2025's Age of Imprisonment. But it feels like the most recent spin-off was the last time we'll see this Kingdom of Hyrule. It fits snugly into the only real hole that was left in this story, the imprisoning war and the founding of Hyrule, and it doesn't seem like the creators have any intentions of carrying this story forward. Not long after the release of Tears of the Kingdom, we learned from Eiji Aonuma that they didn't have plans for DLC, because, quote, "I feel like I've done everything I can to create games in that world. In the first place, the reason why we chose this time as a sequel to the previous game is because we thought there would be value in experiencing a new kind of play in that place in Hyrule. Then, if such a reason is newly born, it may return to the same world again. Whether it's a sequel or a new work, I think it will be a completely new way to play, so I'd be happy if you could look forward to it." So the idea of a threequel, of one last run through this iteration of Hyrule in a sequel to Tears of the Kingdom, feels incredibly unlikely. And again, with Age of Imprisonment serving to fill in some of the gaps of Tears of the Kingdom's narrative, it does feel like this world is now absolutely complete. We have the full story of this Hyrule, right from its very founding all the way up until the final defeat of Ganondorf as the Demon Dragon. The ending of Tears of the Kingdom, with a new group of sages united under Princess Zelda in a Hyrule recovering from the Great Calamity and the upheaval, is a perfect place to end this story. It does feel strange though, looking back at this era and knowing that it's a closed book. Of course, this has been the case for almost every main series Zelda since the very beginning. The norm was for every new Zelda game to be set in a new world, with new characters and a new story, even if that story does echo the stories of the past. That's why the Wild era is so unprecedented. To have stayed here, in this Hyrule, with a story that has evolved over almost a decade, is as much a break from series conventions as the non-linearity and open-air design that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are built around. In many ways, the Zelda team's decision to take their time exploring this world and its history makes sense. This Kingdom of Hyrule is Breath of the Wild's biggest achievement, to the point where the game's title doesn't refer to some magical artifact or important character, but to the world itself, the wilds that Link explores. Not only is the world so much bigger than any Zelda before it, it's also so much more detailed. Every corner of this gigantic kingdom is so intricately designed to be fun and interesting to explore, yet it doesn't feel, for lack of a better term, video gamey either. I've always been into the Zelda series, and in particular, into theorizing on the lore and history of this universe. Zelda storytelling is rarely explicit. It's very open, inviting the player to create their own answers to the questions offered by the games themselves. Ocarina of Time's Forest Temple, Twilight Princess's Snow Peak Ruins, and, well, all of Majora's Mask are all designed to evoke a sense of mystery, and so, back before the release of Breath of the Wild, something I anticipated perhaps more than anything else was the lore, and the theory crafting it would enable. And to say that this expectation was met would be an understatement. Breath of the Wild's Hyrule practically begged the player to ask questions about why things are the way they are, to invent their own theories, to discuss with friends or communities on the internet. The backstory of this Hyrule is woven into the world itself. Stories from the Great Calamity are told only through the environment. There are explicit relics from ancient Hyrule, like the Great Bridge of Hylia, and there are mysteries that help this land feel like it's bigger, older, and more important than just the events of the game itself. But not only that, Breath of the Wild's Hyrule is supported and enriched by 3 other games. Age of Calamity gives us a view at Hyrule before the fall, of what places like the Royal Ancient Tech Lab or the Ranch Ruins looked like before they were destroyed. And Age of Imprisonment travels all the way back to the dawn of the kingdom, when it was almost unrecognizable, but still manages to strengthen this world by doing things like retroactively identifying the ancient tree stump as the husk of Calamo, the adventuring Korok. Tears of the Kingdom expanded the world massively and delved deep into mysterious elements from its predecessor, like the ancient Zonai and the origins of Calamity Ganon. Of course, I do feel that having a direct sequel set in this same world with Tears of the Kingdom lessened its impact somewhat, not just by apparently severing this Hyrule's connection with the Hyrule of the previous games, but simply by the fact of being a sequel in this world. Tears of the Kingdom was forced to answer many of Breath of the Wild's most enticing mysteries, and, as is often the case, the answers weren't as satisfying as the mysteries themselves. But still, it's been so unique and so incredible to have this Hyrule as a living, breathing, evolving world over so many years. It says a lot that I started my channel back in 2015 to talk about the game we knew then as Zelda Wii U, and in 2025, I'm still talking about it. Saying goodbye to this Hyrule will be like saying goodbye to a home, and that's not really an exaggeration. I've spent thousands of hours here, not only playing through these games, but thinking about them, discussing them, and making videos on them. And of course, they're not going anywhere. The games set here will still exist, and so will my channel. I'm not going to stop talking about this iteration of Hyrule when it stops being the most recent. But it does feel strange to think about somewhere else being the new world of Zelda after so many years. It's not just the world itself, though, that defined this era. These days, Breath of the Wild's incarnation of Link is arguably just as iconic as the classic green tunic wearing Link of old. To series veterans, this might sound like heresy, but it's worth remembering that Breath of the Wild, and to a slightly lesser extent Tears of the Kingdom, outsold every other game by a ridiculous margin. This means that most people who played these games weren't fans of the older games at the time. The series has grown so much, and this era has lasted for so long, that there are massive numbers of people for whom this is the only Link they've ever known. While the hero of the Wild's blue tunic seemed strange to Zelda fans when it was first revealed, this design, to millions of people, is Link. To discuss Link, I thought it'd be fitting to include a few words from one of my earliest inspirations on YouTube, and someone who helped jumpstart my channel back in the Zelda Wii U days of 2015, Commonwealth Realm.
The hero of the wilds is by far the most fleshed out incarnation of the hero we have seen in the series yet. Of course, this is partially due to having 3, almost 4 games featuring him, but also due to Breath of the Wild's ingenious narrative structure. By beginning the game with Link as an amnesiac, he knows as much about the world and most importantly about himself as the player does. So together, player and avatar can learn who this hero was and who they can be again. Of course, to match such a departure from the classic Zelda conventions, Breath of the Wild's Link took a departure from his classic design, for the first time dropping the typical green tunic and cap in favor of the blue champion's tunic. This was done for a few reasons. To quote Eiji Aonuma, "Link is the game's protagonist, so I've always thought we need him to look cool. Yet, if we overdo it, the people playing the game might feel like they're controlling an already accomplished hero, which I felt could get in the way of the players immersing themselves in the game. We thought that the iconic green tunic and hat had become expected, so we wanted to mix things up and update his look. And from senior lead artist Yoshiyuki Oyama, the simple answer of, at the beginning of development, we drew a lot of landscape concepts. Link wearing blue clothes appeared pretty early on because the blue stood out against the backgrounds we were producing. This decision made complete sense at the time. A new era for Zelda, a new Link to match it. But looking forward, I think it's time to see a return to form for the hero and the reintroduction of the green tunic, for many of the same reasons outlined by Eiji Aonuma. To say the Hero of the Wilds will be considered among the most iconic versions of the character in the future is to state the obvious. This Link will absolutely be spoken of with the same fondness and importance as the Hero of Time. So, it feels like to really step out of Breath of the Wild's shadow to once again give us something new, the simplest answer would be to give us something old, and to leave the blue tunic behind as an iconic part of this era of the Wild. If you would like to hear Zeltic and me discuss the next Link in more detail, head on over to my channel after this video.
I don't know many people who don't consider the Princess Zelda from these games to be the absolute best iteration of her character so far. Every single one of Zelda's classic traits, wisdom, regality, elegance, are represented by this character, and they're supported by so much more humanity than we've ever seen before. This Zelda doubts herself, she struggles under the burden of the expectations pressed upon her, she worries what others think of her. And again, just like with Link, she has benefited from far more games than any other Zelda, but it's more than that. It's clear just how much care and passion went into forming this character, to the point where her journey forms the emotional arcs of the games. If there's only one thing that the Zelda series could take from the Wild era of games into the next, it should be putting this much emphasis and work into the titular character herself. But we know that there won't just be one thing taken from this era into the next. While we are undoubtedly going to see big changes, it seems clear that Breath of the Wild will be the foundation for the next era of Zelda games too, just as Ocarina of Time formed the foundation not only for its direct sequel, but for the Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword too. Aonuma has said that, "I think it's also fair to say that now we've arrived at Breath of the Wild and the new type of more open play and freedom that it affords, yeah, I think it's correct to say that it has created a new kind of format for the series to proceed from. So whatever's next, we can be pretty confident that it will follow in Breath of the Wild's footsteps, and we'll get a new, gigantic overworld to explore with very little restrictions." And that prospect is so exciting. As much as I've enjoyed this era of Zelda, all the praises I've sung for this Hyrule and its characters in this video, I'd be lying if I said that there wasn't a feeling of something like cabin fever, or even stagnation, that rises from staying in the same setting for so long. I'm so ready to see what's next. The new world Link will visit, the new characters he'll interact with, the new lore to discover and theorize about. And right now, it feels like we're in a transition phase where anything is possible. Looking back, one of the most consistent themes throughout the Zelda series has been, somewhat paradoxically, change. As I said earlier, in the 2000s, the series was taking massive tonal shifts from game to game. It's almost impossible to predict what form 3D Zelda will take from here, but I'd love to see a massive shift from the world and the style we've become so comfortable with. I'd love an art style that's really different from the cel-shaded, almost anime-esque look of Breath of the Wild. And an overworld that isn't Hyrule. Not even a sunken Hyrule or a dark Hyrule, but somewhere else entirely. Next year marks the Zelda series' 40th anniversary, and Tears of the Kingdom's 3rd, so it's not unreasonable to expect that we might see a hint of whatever's next relatively soon. So before that happens, before we know for sure what the future holds, I thought I'd take this opportunity to look back on the era we're leaving, the highs and lows, and speculate on what's next. What that is impossible to say, but I'm ready for it, and I know it'll be legendary. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, leave a like, and subscribe if you haven't already for more Zelda content. Be sure to check out Commonwealth Realms video too, where we had a longer discussion about the future of Link in the Zelda series. Cheers guys, and I'll see you next time.